الحمد لله الذي بنعمته تتم الصالحات الذي خلق السماوات والأرض وأخرج الناس من الظلمات إلى النور بهداية الإسلام فله الحمد في الأول والآخر. All praises belong to Allah. May peace and blessings be upon the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam wa ala alihi, and upon his followers and companions and family. Wa ashabihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. Assalamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear brothers, alhamdulillah, it always makes me happy when I come and visit this masjid. It is, of course, Bayt min biyutillah, a house of the houses of Allah Ta'ala. And at the same time, I know many of you who, for me, although many of you are younger than me, you are role models. And I ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to accept, while we cover this topic of love of Allah Ta'ala, to accept the deeds and belief and Emaan and practices of all of us together, and forgive us our sins and our mistakes and errors. And I particularly bring to mind the brother who we lost a few months ago, about maybe 6 months ago, who was from this community. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give him Jannat al-Firdaus. May Allah ta'ala accept his actions and reward him for his aspirations. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raise up from this community those who are like him and who are even better than him for the goodness of this community. Our topic today, as mentioned by our dear brother, is the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If only a person could measure the degree of love they have for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would probably see, especially in my case, that where they aspire to be is a level quite high in that measure, in that estimate. But a person might be disappointed by their reality, especially when they learn more about the love of Allah Ta'ala. If a person is disappointed based on knowledge of who Allah is, based on a desire to be close to Him, and based on a knowledge of their weaknesses and their errors, then that disappointment only develops humbleness in the heart. It develops a humbleness, a tawadu' in front of Allah Ta'ala, and it also develops light in one's heart, because one of the basic elements of nearness to Allah is to know who we are, and one of the basic elements of getting close to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is to know who He is. So if a person does become, for a moment, weak at the knees when they try to say, I love Allah, and then they realize what it means, that perhaps their life before them hasn't really proven that fully, then that's okay, because Allah Ta'ala loves those who are humble, and loves those who want to be close to Him. And it reminds me of the saying of Imam al-Shafi'i, مَزْدَدْتُ عِلْمًا إِلَّا إِزْدَدْتُ جَهْلًا. The more I increased in knowledge, the more I realized how ignorant I was. The more we learn about the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you can see what will happen to us. Learning about the love of Allah doesn't increase a person in pride, but it increases one's amazement of who Allah Ta'ala is, and amazement after that of those who trod the way of nearing themselves to Him. Allah Ta'ala says, referring to Ibrahim alayhi salam, رَبِّ هَبْ لِي حُكْمًا وَأَلْحِقْنِي بِالصَّالِحِينَ. O my Lord, grant me authority with wisdom and join me with the righteous. Make me join the righteous ones. وَاجْعَلْ لِي لِسَانَ صِدْقٍ فِي الْآخِرِينَ. And let it be that words of truth and honor remain concerning me. This is Ibrahim alayhi salam talking, in later generations. وَاجْعَلْنِي مِنْ وَرَثَةِ جَنَّةِ النَّعِيمِ. And place me among the inheritors of the gardens of pleasure. وَاغْفِرْ لِأَبِي إِنَّهُ كَانَ مِنَ الضَّالِّينَ. But forgive my father, indeed he was amongst those who went astray. And of course, Allah Ta'ala required Ibrahim alayhi salam to retract that after he had died, after the death of Ibrahim, or death of the father. وَلَا تُخْزِنِي يَوْمَ يُبْعَثُونَ. And don't let it be that I'm disgraced on the day they're all resurrected and raised up, the day of judgment. يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ. On the day that no wealth nor banun, children, will assist a person, help anybody. إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. Except for the one who met Allah while his heart was salim. The word salim means to be healthy. But the opposite is sickness, isn't it? So it's sufficient for the heart to be salim, to be free from illnesses. We might think of health as in someone who's extremely fit and athletic, and if they went to have a medical checkup, the doctor will be astounded by their health. But here we're just talking about being free from illnesses. Sufficient to be free from internal illnesses of the heart, of the soul, that plague the heart and the soul. I'll come back to the meaning of salim from Ibn Rajab as well. Let's look at the opposite then, or let's look at something that complements this ayah. So here Ibrahim alayhi salam is being told that wealth, here in these ayat, we are told that wealth and children will not benefit a person except for the one who comes to Allah with a pure heart. And we know that the normal relationship we have with children, with our children, our beloved children, and a wealth which is beloved to us, is that exactly that, love. And there is a sense of desire to want to develop that relationship. So Allah Ta'ala here in this ayah is describing that a person, even in these lawful pursuits, that itself is not a cause of benefit unless a person has the highest love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if a person puts the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala secondary to their wealth, or pursuit for wealth, or pursuit for their children, in wanting to boast and brag in front of people about their achievements with their children, if the person puts the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the rules and regulations of Islam below that, then the heart will become corrupt. So it's an interesting ayah to start on, because it's to do with love, it's to do with disease, it's to do with that which is outwardly lawful in our relationships with them. So it's almost like a warning as well, because we know that we have the lawful and we have the unlawful. So what if desire and passion is followed regarding that which is unlawful, especially for considerable long periods of time, or in a habitual way, or in an addicted way. Allah Ta'ala says about the people who enter Jannah, وَسِيقَ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا رَبَّهُمْ إِلَى الْجَنَّةِ زُمَرًا. Those who feared their Lord. At-taqaw here means to protect yourself, to put a barrier between yourself and that which keeps you away from Allah Ta'ala. They'll be driven towards Jannah in huge crowds. حتى إذا جاءوها وفتحت أبوابها, until when they eventually come to it, and the doors eventually open. وقال لهم خزنتها سلام عليكم طبتم, and the guards of the doors, at the doors of the paradise will say, peace be upon you, salamun alaykum, peace and security be upon you, طبتم, you purified yourselves, you are pure, فَدَخُلُوهَا خَالِدِينَ, so enter Jannah now forever. The point here is that these people purified themselves. The word طبتم, from the word طيب, which many of you are familiar with, is used here. So once again, we learned that their qalb was salim, free from faults, and they were tayyib, from the inner to the outer. And then Allah Ta'ala reminds us also about the test of life, what's it about, whether they are internal tests or tests with our interactions with others, or those who we are influenced by in good ways or bad ways. Allah Ta'ala tells us, لِيَمِيزَ اللَّهُ الْخَبِيثَ مِنَ الطَّيِّبِ, by that His motive is to distinguish or separate those who are khabith, filthy, who make themselves impure internally, from the tayyib, min at-tayyib, from those who purify themselves, those who are pure. وَيَجْعَلَ الْخَبِيثَ بَعْضَهُ عَلَى بَعْضٍ, and then He will make the khabith on top of each other. They will mount up on top of each other, the filth within a person. So the interesting point is that when we go through tests, the objective of that test is to purify. We can say it's to pass the test, but also if a person fails the test and it's to do with halal and haram, they are earning some khubth, some filth, some impurity, some abstract impurity for the hearts, for their minds, for their eyes, for their limbs, for their bodily parts. So a person is constantly in those transactions of exchanging, giving up some purity for some impurity, or cleansing oneself and acquiring purity for themselves. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said in an authentic hadith, أَلَا وَإِنَّ فِي الْجَسَدِ مُضْغَةً, verily in the body there is a piece of flesh, mudghah. إِذَا صَلَحَتْ صَلَحَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ, when it becomes rectified, the whole body will become rectified. وَإِذَا فَسَدَتْ, and when this piece of flesh becomes impure or becomes corrupt, فَسَدَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ, the whole body will become corrupt. أَلَا وَهِيَ الْقَلْبِ, verily it is the heart. When a person, how many people are familiar with this hadith? I think most people. Put your hands up. People familiar with it? Most people. Very important to stop at hadith, especially which we're familiar with, and avoid the tendency to mentally to read off the rest of the hadith, and what could happen is that the reflection is paused, because I know, the Shaykh's mentioning that, the Imam's mentioning so and so, I know it, but the habit should be that even when we hear it, then perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is helping us hear it again, because we need to go deeper into it. So knowledge is only true knowledge if it's reflected on, practiced upon, and even after the practice, to reflect on the practice, to go back to the knowledge, to see if we had understood it correctly the first time. This hadith, what does it emphasize? It emphasizes the importance of the heart. This hadith is talking about the importance of bodily practice. The intention of this hadith is to tell us about the importance of your bodies and your limbs, and that your limbs should not go into the forbidden zones, and that which would make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala angry with us. But it's also emphasizing that if you concentrate on your practice alone, you'll find that you might reach a ceiling or hit a brick wall. You need to concentrate on the heart more. Now, if you say to someone, I give my heart to you, what does that mean? What does that refer to? Which emotion does that refer to? And in ancient times and in modern times, giving your heart to someone is equivalent to love. So what is it? Which emotion is it? If you control and you purify and rectify that emotion, your whole body will be good. And which emotion is it towards you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Which if you damage, if you spoil or corrupt, then that would mean that the whole body or actions will start to become corrupt and spoilt and damaged in your journey, in one's journey towards the hereafter. Which emotion is it? It is the emotion, of course, of love. Loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And everything that comes from that fountain, loving Allah, loving for the sake of Allah, disliking and hating for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala too. And to be more knowledgeable about one's own weaknesses and where one hasn't served Allah ta'ala well, to be more knowledgeable about that and to be more upset about that than the errors of others. And to spend a journey of self-rectification. And when that person spends a journey of correcting love in one's heart, then that person is in a better position, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give gifts of words to the other person, the person's communicating to convince them better. So Ibn Rajab said that this is an indication إشارة إلى أن صلاح حركات العبد بجوارحه واجتنابه المحرمات واتقائه للشبهات بحسب صلاح حركات قلبه. This hadith is an indication that fixing and rectifying, for a person to fix and rectify their movements, their bodily movements, to stay away from haram too, to stay also away from doubtful actions, shubahat. Doubtful actions are that which is hard to realize, is it really haram or not? It resembles haram in one point of view, but I can't find a clear text that is actually haram. So for a person to be rectified physically in their behavior, that is, towards those things, that rectification begins, or depends on the rectification of the heart. So the correction of a person's movements, his stopping from haram and leaving the doubtful, is based on the correct movements of the heart. Very powerful statement, movements of the heart. So when we speak about action a lot of the time, in Islamic discussions, in early literature about the heart and Emaan, etc., there is this common theme. As much as the actions of the body are spoken about, the actions of the heart are discussed too. He then continues and says, فَإِذَا كَانَ قَلْبُهُ سَلِيمًا, if his heart is salim. Remember the prayer of Ibrahim a.s. or what Ibrahim a.s. is told, two ways of looking at it. The one who goes to Allah with a heart that is salim, free from faults, free from self-inflicted damage. If a person's heart is salim, meaning healthy, once again, has restored to health, لَيْسَ فِيهِ إِلَّا مَحَبَّةَ اللَّهِ وَمَحَبَّةَ مَا يُحِبُّهُ اللَّهِ, and there's nothing in it save that which Allah, except the love of Allah and the love of that which Allah loves, and the fear of Allah, and fear of falling into that which He hates and dislikes. When that happens, what grows from that is the abandoning of all haram and the distance from all that which is doubtful. If the heart is healthy, only containing the love of Allah and His loves and the fear of Allah and the fear of falling into that which He hates and dislikes, the only thing that can grow then from the heart is the abandoning of all haram and distance from the doubtful. So the person, by rectifying the heart, avoids trouble on a daily and on an hourly basis. He also said, and it's been said by ulama before him too, Al-qalbu malikul a'adha, the heart is the king of all the body parts. وَبَقِيَةُ الْأَعْضَاءِ جُنُودُهُ وَهُمْ مَعَ هَذَا جُنُودٌ طَائِعِينَ لَهُ. The heart is the king of all the bodily parts, which are his army, obedient to the king. So once again, the word heart is synonymous to love. the whole body follows and obeys a person's love, a person's passions, a person's desires. If one's love is not cured, and if one's hate is not cured, then a person's body will obey like soldiers do. So when scholars made statements like that, they wanted to emphasize that your body, your actions are just a representation of that which is internal. And if that which is internal is summed up with the word love or qalb. So loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requires a conscious decision to love Allah and to love that which Allah loves, and a conscious decision to hate those actions and ideas that Allah ta'ala hates. And if a person does that, they will make progress with their behavior, with their practice, etc. One of our problems is ignorance. For example, a person might be ignorant of that which Allah loves, ignorant of that which Allah hates. So ignorantly the person remains ignorant and not loving Allah Ta'ala. So a person commits a crime in the sight of Allah Ta'ala and is content with it, while Allah Ta'ala is not content with him or her. And perhaps this is something which the person should know really. And through studying with teachers, with trusted teachers, and reading authentic books, a person shouldn't be oblivious of this knowledge. Similarly, a person could be falling into errors which they know are wrong, but they become desensitized. So they are aware of the malnutrition. They are feeding their souls by falling into a certain error, but they choose to act as if they're ignorant about it. So their behavior shows they don't know. Their behavior and conduct shows that this isn't such a bad thing. This isn't such a haram thing. So once again, the heart remains ignorant and uncured. And what's worse is that the cure is with the person in their reading, in their reflection, and in their experiences, and from the words of the people who that person has interacted with. What could be even worse than that is a person doesn't think they need to know. Similar to the first, there's a sense of big-headedness, that the little I know is enough. And even though there are indications there's more to know, they want to remain ignorant, and they're happy with that. And they feel pity on those who follow the deen in a pure way. They feel pity for the ones who maybe study hard, or who discuss about religious masail, or who are always searching for the truth in different issues and reflect on what they're learning, or they reflect on their errors, or they reflect on how they can improve in their practice, in their da'wah, in their dealings with their family members, especially parents, and those who have rights over you, and vice versa. They pity them. They think these people are chained. They think these people are missing out on the dunya. But that passion and love which they gain by their attachment and their engrossment with the dunya cannot equal the love that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the abd, the sincere abd in this world, and gives the sincere abd in the hereafter. La yastawiyan. These two cannot ever equate. And in this scenario, people's perceptions should be minimized in a person's mind. Ibn Rajab, quoting the ayah I opened this talk with, he said, كما قال تعالى, as Allah Ta'ala said, يوم لا ينفع مال ولا بنون إلا من أتى الله بقلب سليم. The one on that day whose wealth and children will not avail him, save the one who came to Allah with a heart that which was healthy. Surah Ash-Shu'ara 88 to 89. He said that An-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam used to say in his dua, As'aluka qalban salima. I ask you for a heart that is cured, or a heart that is healthy. He said that al-qalbu salim, in that case, fal-qalbu salim, the healthy heart, I'd prefer to say salim, and we get used to the word salim and salim. Huwa salim min al-afat. It is the one that is healthy. It can be healthy from afat, from flaws in one's journey. وَالْمَكْرُوهَاتِ. So afat could be the major afat, the major crimes in the sight of Allah Ta'ala. وَالْمَكْرُوهَاتِ, and that which Allah dislikes and hates in their entirety, he says. In the entirety. So the question is that if a person is to have a qalb salim, would they need to be a person who's knowledgeable? And the answer is, of course, yes. Either by themselves they are knowledgeable in the sense that they've got to a high level of studying knowledge, or they are on a lesser level of studying knowledge, but they're always asking the right questions and they spend their time with people of knowledge. And it's important to spend time with people of knowledge, although lectures are available to people, that's excellent. Talks, etc. are available to people. And reading too. But it is important to study with a teacher who has studied with other teachers, because what they will do is correct a person's misunderstandings. A misunderstanding you didn't know you had. It could be that you picked up a mistranslation, or you picked and you chose not to share that mistranslation with others. That will be fortunate in a way, but unfortunate in another way, because a person wouldn't have realized that they made an error. And we do have a crisis, I would say, that there is a lot of misunderstanding. A lot of people who have passion but haven't understood the depth of Islam. They got to the shores of Islam's knowledge and assumed that the depth I've got to now, it can't get much deeper over there in the ocean there. So they assumed that the shallow knowledge which they had was actually quite deep. They compared themselves with those who had no knowledge at all, perhaps, and they misjudged those people who perhaps had a lot more knowledge and thought of knowledge differently. They actually judged too quickly the whole world based on that little knowledge they had. So having a qalb salim requires us to know, or to be with those who know. And it requires us to have an attitude towards ourselves of, I know some things, but I don't know a lot. So there could be that category of what you want to know. But you also have to have that category of that which I don't know I need to know. I haven't realized that I need to know this and that, etc. It really humbles a person, and it really sets a person onto the door, onto the journey of knowledge, so a person's not satisfied with what they are upon or what are in their particular surroundings. You might look historically as well, why in certain sections, certain periods of history, in certain locations, people they suffice themselves with the knowledge they had. But perhaps in that knowledge they had, there are examples of there may be a major or a minor innovation they were upon. Or for example, a misunderstanding. Or even some of the scholars sometimes hadn't travelled enough to discuss with other scholars in another part of the world, to challenge their understandings and to perhaps have a more authentic understanding. So my motto for myself, in a sense, is to never sit still in that and continue the journey and be able to challenge one's understanding especially on complicated issues. Okay, he continues, the qalb salim is the heart that is freed or salim from afat, internal flaws and errors, and that which Allah describes. Then he says, and it is the heart that which has nothing there but the love of Allah and what Allah loves. It is the heart that has nothing there but the love of Allah and what Allah loves, and the fear of Allah, and the fear of what distances a person from Allah. So the opportunity will be given in the subsequent weeks for someone to speak about the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But just to touch on it here, to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what Allah loves, and to fear Allah. And this is an enlightened fear, khashiyah, and the fear of that which distances one from Allah ta'ala. To be honest, if you were to take that and write it down and reflect on it even for an hour, there's so much that can come out of that. Because I think what's more important after this is for a person to be able to sit with themselves and ask those key questions, because they're different. Some of the issues which we have are similar, and some could be very specific and different. And there's only so much a talk and a lecture can do. The echoes of this talk and lecture might disappear from your souls in a day or two, I hope not. Which is why it's important to write. At the same time, your own echoes from your own souls will remain there if you sit with yourself and ask, what do I love? Don't be impatient. Do I love Allah? Then do I love that which Allah loves? Do I hate that which Allah hates? And so on. Do I really fear being far from Him? And really evaluate every small and every big. And things will start coming out of one's soul, which perhaps the shaitan tried to bury. Or one's haste in fulfilling our dunya commitments make us forget. And it's severe, it's grave. Because the true faqih, the true knowledgeable one, whilst that knowledgeable one is knowledgeable about the law, the deen, the path, the Sirat al-Mustaqim, the virtues of following the Sirat al-Mustaqim, and the person knows about the lives of those who follow the Sirat al-Mustaqim from the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum onwards. At the same time, the person has to take that within themselves and reflect. If I was to write an autobiography, a true one that comes from the soul, which no one would read, then how would I judge my love of Allah and my journeying towards Allah, my honesty with Allah Ta'ala? So once again, a healthy, cured heart is a heart which is freed from all errors and hated matters, full of Allah's love and what Allah loves and fear of Him and all that makes one far from Him. Imam Al-Hasan Al-Basri, one of the tabi'een, may Allah help the Muslimin in Al-Basra, he said, Dawi qalbak, cure your heart. It's almost like saying pour medicine into your heart or give a treatment to your heart. Cure your heart. Give medicine to your heart. فَإِنَّ حَاجَةَ اللَّهِ لَلْعِبَادِ صَلَاحُ قُلُوبِهِمْ. Because what Allah wants from His slaves is for them to rectify their hearts. Cure your heart, for what Allah actually wants from you is for you to rectify your heart. If this topic is new to you, initially when you go into it, a person might stumble, might be confused, but the more you go into it, the more you'll find that this affects the rest of your journey in the most impacting way. He also said, اعلم أنك لن تحب الله حتى تحب طاعته. Know that you won't love Allah until you love His obedience. So if a person reflects that the manifestation, the flowering of one's love is through the flowering of one's actions, of words and their movements, their tilawah of Quran, their attachment to the places that Allah loves, the house of Allah Ta'ala, the attachment of actions and behavior which Allah loves, like pardoning one another, giving the other person the benefit of the doubt, respecting the people of knowledge, respecting the elders of the community, respecting, honoring the young and those who have hardships in their lives, like people who are struggling because they're orphans, especially whether it's in this part of the world or another part of the world, widows as well. There's so much by which a person can measure whether they love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because obeying Allah ta'ala in all these different spheres of life requires knowledge, requires what's best to do in the situation. There could be someone who is more capable to do that particular task. It could be a fard kifaya. You will not love Allah Ta'ala until you know it's only if you love obeying Allah that you've loved Him. A scholar from the early days called Hannan, they used to call him Hannan, was asked, Mata uhibbu Rabbi? When could I say that I've loved my Lord, Allah? When can I say I love Him? And you might remember the beginning of the talk, one of the introductions was that the more we learn about the love of Allah Ta'ala, the more one questions how how perhaps over-optimistic they were in how they thought the result would be. When would I have loved my Lord? And he replied, إذا كان ما يبغضه عندك أمر من الصبر. He said, it is when your soul, إذا كان ما يبغضه عندك أمر من الصبر. If everything that Allah Ta'ala hates you treat with sabr and patience, then you've loved your Lord. If Allah Ta'ala hates something, a situation, a place, an action, an activity, if a person treats all of those scenarios with sabr meaning to abstain, then you'd have loved your Lord. And this is excellent teaching from Dhunnun, because perhaps the questioner has come with him with an assumption that to help the person focus on perhaps dhikr and dua and nawafil actions. They were living in a time where people were praying hundreds of raka'at, where people were fasting continually, and a lot of the time there could be situations where the person who is busy with nawafil has left something or is doing something which is haram, like not fulfilling the rights of their siblings, their brothers and sisters who are in need, and so on. You can see where the irony can develop. The person outwardly is pious and loves nawafil and loves salawat, etc., and that's good. Allah loves that, but they have a flaw which they're not dealing with. Or it could be a personal desire or passion of something which is not correct. And the early scholars used to speak about rectifying the love of not lowering the gaze. And when one lowers one gaze, one is actually accepting the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when one prolongs one gaze or prolongs one's look, then a person is actually omitting or extracting the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from their hearts. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help all of us in our weaknesses and turn them into strengths. When have I loved my Lord? When will I know? Oh, it is when your soul, it is when everything that Allah hates is something you treat with sabr. And that's a big statement. Bishr ibn Sari said, ليس من أعلام الحب أن تحب ما يبغضه حبيبك. It is not a sign of love for you to love that which your beloved hates. So you are sitting, let's say, with a dear friend of yours, and everything they do you hate, and everything they say you hate, and what they offer to you of food to share you hate, and every conversation they want to talk about or to open you hate and dislike too, or every topic, then that's not a sign of love at all then. He said, it is not a sign of love to love what your beloved hates. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates certain things, it is not right for us, if He's our beloved, to love that. And loving that is to perform or approach or go near. Or if there's an element of that hate in something which is doubtful and not clear-cut haram, the one who treats Allah as his Habib distances themselves from that. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Man a'ta lillah, whoever gives for the sake of Allah, wa man'a lillah, and withholds for the sake of Allah, wa ahabba lillah, and loves for Allah, wa abghada lillah, and hates for Allah, faqad istakmala al-iman. That person has completed their iman, has perfected. Istakmala from the word kamil. So the root of completing one's iman is the heart, it is love. To do things for the sake of Allah Ta'ala. So a person in their progress and in their journey observes themselves. Why did I do A, B, C actions? And if they reflect and they can see that A was for Allah, B was for Allah, C was for Allah, then that is a great state to be in. But if a person reflects and they say, well, that wasn't really for Allah. I tried to make it for Allah, but I realized I was being selfish. It's actually for me as well. And B, well, that as well. And C, I didn't get to C. So it wasn't even motivated enough to do C. If a person can observe themselves internally and look at what the motives are behind actions and try to polish up doing things for Allah's sake. Again, your person's got to sit with themselves, really think about it. And if by doing that you find you are being genuine to Allah, then alhamdulillah, that's brilliant. When you find that X and Y was purely for the sake of Allah, you've only got Allah to thank. And that actually helps the person on the journey even more. Because it is important to think of one's good deeds, to thank Allah Ta'ala, and to motivate you to keep doing those good deeds. Because there could be a time where for 6 months a person is focused on a particular good deed, and then for whatever reason, for 2 years a person hasn't engaged in that good deed anymore, and he was someone who perhaps was being accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with that. Al-Hasan al-Basri then said, I've never gazed, nor spoken, nor touched, nor stood on my feet without comparing. Is it obedience or is it disobedience? Then, if it's obedience, I proceed. Again, a very deep level of questioning oneself. Knowing the path, but then questioning oneself. And that world you live within yourself, as long as it doesn't lead to waswasa and like an OCD type statement, Allah help those who have OCD, it's a person becomes knowledgeable about themselves. Allah Ta'ala says, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ. Do not be like those who forgot Allah. And then the consequence was that they forgot themselves. Not knowing yourself isn't something praiseworthy. And it shows a person doesn't know Allah. If a person knows Allah and the rights of Allah and then observes one's state with that, then a person hasn't forgotten Allah and the person won't have himself forgotten. So just to look at the purpose, look at the point of love, there's so much really to develop on what scholars have said about love. What's the opposite of love? There are different opposites. There's shirk, there's kufr, there's battling, challenging Allah's qadr and qada, all sorts of diseases, hating for your nafs, loving for your nafs only, or hating for a particular nationality, or loving for a particular nationality, or being biased and unjust. But if a person becomes engrossed, now as people who take their religion seriously, if we become engrossed in that which is halal, there's something not right about that. Because a person's beginning to love and hate for the sake of that particular action, to the extent that if they were bothered, they'll feel really bothered. More than they would perhaps in religious matters. And that's something important to reflect on. So the ayah we spoke about earlier was about the one about wealth and children will not avail a person on the Day of Judgment, but what will avail the person is to cure your heart, to cure the love which is in the heart. Now if you're engrossed in love with something which is doesn't have that much benefit, then that's not something which was praiseworthy in the time of the Salaf. Once Ali ibn Abi Talib saw some people playing chess, and he said, what are these idols you are standing over? What Ibn Rajab's perspective on this was that it was their attachment and engrossment. So we're not talking about the issue of halal and haram on the chess, etc. It's more to do with a person's being engrossed. So what I want to take away from that narration is being over engrossed and not leaving the window of dhikr and reflection Islamically. Perhaps you read a novel, but read a novel and reflect on it Islamically. Perhaps you are studying engineering, so read your books and study them, but also link it with your deen. In fact, I'm amazed sometimes. I once met a person who was studying, who was quite a senior manager, but couldn't in the company, but couldn't link their management practice to that which comes from the Quran and Sunnah and Hadith, and wasn't reflecting, wasn't joining the dots. Intelligence a lot of time is joining the dots. But similarly, Ali ibn Abi Talib, he once saw someone addicted, someone who was continually addicted to alcohol. And he said something similar. He said, you are like the one who is addicted, mudmin al-khamr, is like one who stands over idols. And that is more in a more literal sense, in a sense that, well, in a more severe sense, so I take that back, not literal, in a more severe sense, that a person is passionate about that action, that behavior, not for the sake of Allah, and it's haram, and it's destroying them, and it's a clear command not to do that. So it's as if the person is worshipping that thing. And that tells us something else, that a person could be so addicted, and this is for internal reflection again, rather than accusing people, etc. Most of my talks are to do with internal reflection, unless we're doing community correction. Allah Ta'ala says, أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ. Have you seen the one who turns their desires, their motives and desires into gods? That's a really heavy ayah, because it tells us that in Islam we have that which is halal, that which is haram. If I become obsessed with the haram, and it begins to call me, and it begins to control me, then there comes a time where perhaps only Allah knows when I've taken it into a god. I've turned that into a god beside Allah and worshipped it falsely. I would hate to be in a situation where I, on the Day of Judgment, arrive there. May Allah Ta'ala help our standings be short. But eventually a person stands before Allah Ta'ala to know that that which led them into Jahannam was their attachment to that which was haram, and then to learn that they actually had turned it into a god beside Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because one of the consequences of sin and error is your radar switches off. A person stops thinking about the nature of the sin. The nature of addiction switches one radar off completely. So that previous aqidah knowledge of where that attachment to that sin turns into kufr and shirk, they haven't got that anymore, or it's switched off, they had it, it's failing and malfunctioning. The person then perseveres into shirk and kufr with that attachment to that particular haram, not realizing they've left the deen in an internal way, in an internal shirky way. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the tawfiq that He takes all that which we love and desire and make all of that for His sake in a halal way and a pleasing way. And if there is anything within ourselves which is destructively or discreetly destroying us, and there is an attachment to that, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring us back, and those who hear this, bring us back, so we don't end up on the Day of Judgment as those who have taken their desires as gods besides Allah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all qalban saliman. May Allah give us all qalban saliman. May He make us love that which He loves and hate that which He hates. May He make us love that which He loves and dislike that which distances us from Him. These few words is all I have had to say. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us reflection and renewed intention and acceptance from Him. May Allah ta'ala help us reflect. Jazakumullah khairan.